I hope everyone had an easy fast last week. Today, going through the Parsha of Et Hanan, it includes the very first paragraph of the daily Shema, and the second verse of which is V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. And anyone who has studied the texts of Torah and Gemara and Medrash and Kabbalah and Chassidut knows that this is a hot topic item, the love of the divine. I'm going to share with you a heretical reading, that of Simone Weil, who was born Jewish and converted to Catholicism. She parachuted into France during the Second World War to identify with the workers who were slave laborers and died of tuberculosis. In her writings, she talks about the love of God. And she says, meeting and separation, both of them contain some good. And this good of friendship is unique. For when two beings who are not friends are near each other, there is no meeting. And when friends are far apart, there is no separation. As both forms contain the same good thing, they are both equally good. And I like this motif. I'm titling this podcast, The Impossible Love of the Divine. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha is one of the mitzvahs in the Tariag mitzvahs, the 613 commandments. And how is one possibly expected to love the divine? So let's look at Rashi, our go-to commentator, who immediately picks up on the V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. He picks up on a semantic or grammatical problem. It says b'chol levavecha. Do you see that? Levavecha? B'chol levavecha, which means literally with all your hearts in the plural. Because if it would be with all your heart, it would have said b'chol libecha. But it says l'chol levavecha. And so, quoting the Sifri, he says b'chol levavecha. Well, if you have more than one heart, you have two hearts. Well, maybe you have two chambers in the heart. So, and in each chamber, you'll find two different drives. So immediately, he propels us into this schizophrumkeit. That is, our heart is split into two, the right chamber and the left chamber. Remember, the Gemara in Chulin talks about trephus in an animal. From there we learn that in Talmudic times there were only two chambers, not four chambers of the heart, according to Galen as well. So B'shnei Yisrecha means that on the right side of the heart you have one yetzer, one drive, and on the left side of the heart you have another yetzer. The right, the dextra, is positive. The left, the sinister, is negative. So b'chol levavecha, with all your hearts in plural, means b'shnei yitzrecha, with both your drives, the drive to good and the drive to evil. The davar acher, b'chol levavecha, with all your heart, also reflects this kind of duality, this double-chambered heart, and says, Shelo yeh libecha cholek, but now it's a metaphor. Your heart should not be duplicitous. It shouldn't be divided about the omnipresent. And there he brings Gemara, in which Osul Odom laharher achar Kodesh Baruch Hu. Don't allow your heart to question the divine. In both these cases, the split heart, in terms of following the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, and the heart that shouldn't be questioning the divine, because maybe the right side believes and the left side questions, both move us away from the word ahava. Ahava is love. It's an emotion. It's in the heart. B'chol levovecha. The literal reading is you shall love God with all your heart. And yet Rashi, quoting the Sifri and the Gemara, immediately moves it into some kind of intellectual problem that you have with the love of the divine. Now, if we look at the Mishnah, which would be the next text that we should study, because chronologically I like to do that. The Mishnah, the Mishnah in Brachos chapter 9 says, on a completely different angle. It's the last chapter of the Mishnah in Brachos, and it's talking about different areas in which you have to bless. Then it comes, so, you know, someone, Bona Bayis Chodosh, you build a new house, Kona Kelim Chodoshim, you make a Shechiyonu, and then it says, Chayv Odom Levorech Al Hora Kashem Shemavorech Al Atov. A person is obligated to bless God for the bad, just like he would bless God for the good. And what is the proof text? That you have to bless God for the bad stuff that happens to you as much as the good stuff. Our pasuk in our Sedra, V'yahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levovecha. Now, what is b'chol levovecha? Comes the Mishnah, b'shnei yitzrecha, with both your inclinations, just like Rashi said, b'yetzer tov u'b'yetzer hara. Now, that Mishnah would seem to imply that the Yetzer Hara has nothing to do with the naughty drive inside your left side of your heart, but has to do with the Dova Acher, that you shouldn't go maharher after HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You shouldn't go questioning the divine justice. Yetzer Tov means you should love God with all your heart, meaning the Yetzer Tov, the good things that happen to you, Kashem Shemavorech Al HaTov, that's the Yetzer Tov. And Yetzer Hara then would imply when bad things happen to you, just like God is for the good. God blesses for the good, and love Hashem for the bad that happens to you. For the bad that happens to you. Means you should love God by following one's good inclination and one's alternative inclination, because when bad stuff happens to you, you may immediately wish to not to question, to be maharer after God. And so our question then becomes, once again, what on earth has that got to do with the emotion of love? Well, you could say that the Gemara, the Mishnah and the Gemara afterwards, actually does talk about an emotion, because the emotion is the emotional response to good stuff and bad stuff. Okay. But now let's think about the Rambam, because the Rambam completely does not go along that it's not an emotional thing. The Rambam in his Mishnah Torah defines the obligation of Ahavat Hashem twice. And he approaches this idea of Chayv Odom Levorech Al Hara, of V'yahavta es Hashem Elokecha, from two separate different ways. Let me first show what the Rambam is basing himself on. He's basing himself on the same Sifri that Rashi had, in fact, quoted. The Sifri in Devarim Piska 33. V'hoyu hadvarim ha'ele asher nochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha. They shall be on your heart. Rebbe said, why was this said? It's already said, v'yahavta Hashem elokecha b'chol levavecha. So Rebbe says, I do not know how one loves God. OMG. Rebbe is already telling us this phenomenological problem with the love of the divine. It's an impossible love to love that which is soivev kol almin. It's impossible to love such a thing. Now, the Baal HaTanya will tell us how we come through his bonus to love Hashem, to realize the grandeur of Hashem, that he's beyond all description. It remains unclear to those of us who don't come from Lithuania how the mere knowledge of something would create love. Now, if you go to the Google and you talk about intelligent design and you ask the Rav, the Admor mi Google, about all the philosophers and scientists who have likewise dealt with this problem, that is, those who have dealt with the concept that the knowledge of the great universe inspires one to the love of the divine. In fact, Heschel in Man in Search of God starts on page 1 by saying, when I look at the starry sky, I'm filled with wonder and awe. And you see the difference, depending on whether it's a Christian website or it's just Neil Tice deGrasse, whether these scientists come to any kind of mystical science. There is this group of physicists, cosmologists, who do come to this sense of grand design and the love of the design. But our Sifri is very rational. I do not know how one loves God. Therefore it says, shall be on your heart. Meaning, how do I come to the love of God? It's the things which I command you this day. Meaning, place these things upon your heart. That means the Torah and mitzvahs, so that you'll recognize that you'll come to recognize who created the world. Meaning, by the love of the divine can only come through the intermediary of Torah. That's what the Sifri is saying. Now, Sifri we're talking about 3rd, 4th century. So they've already experienced the Churban. So the Rambam tells us in 2 places, it says, when a person contemplates his great wondrous actions and creations, and through them beholds his boundless wisdom, he immediately loves, praises, glorifies, and experiences a longing to know the great name. That means one comes to love of God through the study of science and nature and cosmology. That's what it says in the Rambam. But then, the next paragraph, he informs us that for this reason he chose to devote a number of chapters here, in the beginning of Mishnah Torah, Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, to scientific material which does not relate to Torah. The Rambam is saying that. He presents this information because basic scientific knowledge is what leads a person to experience Ahavat Hashem. So for the Rambam, the scientific understanding and the rational laws of the world lead to the love of the divine. But later, he comes to the return to the concept of Ahavas Hashem in the 10th and final chapter of Hilchos Tshuva. Gewalt. And then he says in Hilchos Tshuva, what is the proper kind of love of God? It is that one loves God with great, immense, abundant, powerful love to the point where his soul is bound with the love of God, such that he thinks of it constantly, like those who are lovesick. If I wouldn't have read this in the Rambam, I thought this would have been Rabbeinu Bachaya, other more emotive medievalists, bound with the love of God such that he thinks of it constantly like those who are lovesick, that their minds are not free from the love of that woman of whom they think constantly. So here the Rambam speaks of Ahavas Hashem as an emotional state rather in terms of a mode of conduct. So how do you resolve these two passages? And the later scholars have tried to. But before I do that, I want to share with you the Rabbeinu Bechaya, because the Rabbeinu Bechaya takes issue with the Rambam in this kind of, how would I say this? The way the Rambam slides in his two passages. One is an intellectual understanding of God, and one is an emotional love sickness of the divine. And it's very critical as we move from this in my theological trajectory to understanding how impossible can love the divine following Churban. So Rabbeinu Bechaya says, Mashma shechoylek al b'china zeh. Rabbeinu Bechaya completely rejects this. And this is what he said. Now I'm quoting straight from the Rabbeinu Bechaya. Im tishal vato mekiven shematzinu shemalas hacheshek hi gedolah mimalas haba. We know that there are two types of emotions. One is ahava, and one is cheshek. Aha! The Rambam was talking cheshek, besotted with love, obsession. Hi gedolah mimala ahava. It's a much greater level of emotional attachment than love. V'choshakta v'lama ama v'yahavta. So if he wanted to say, how do I come to the love of the divine, he should have said the word cheshek, not ahava. Hatshuva bazeh ki hi hanosenes sharei oyev mi she'oyev adova ov l'osid tishkach mimenu. Love is dependent on an object of desire. And so there is something in the object of desire that is triggering the love. Kagain ba'esh ochel or ba'es hashena, when you're eating or sleeping, right? Then when you've satisfied that urge, the love is gone. Avomisha choshek, someone who is besotted with desire, not with the object of desire, but with desire itself, ein machshavto nirfredes min hachoshech. There is no separation between the beloved and the lover. It is an obsession. Afilu be'esh yochel yizkarenu, gam be'esh hashina yirenu b'chalom. Rabbeinu Bechaya says you even dream about her when you're dreaming. When you're eating, you're thinking of her. And now he comes with this absolutely stunning idea. We are commanded with the two yetzes, the two chambers of the heart, the right chamber and the left chamber. Ubenefesh hamitaveh, ubekol mamoina, because it says bechol nafshecha, even if he takes your soul, b'chol ma'modecha, even if he takes all your money. Yitztorech ha'adam la'aves kulam b'dvarim ha'muchrachim ki yev shelo yezu lotam. So we're told sheyavu sam be'inyan ha'muchrach. So he's telling us that there's a complete difference between ahava and cheshek. Now let's go back to then those latter-day scholars who point out that the Rambam really has a problem in trying to resolve the difference between the love of the divine through the intellectual pursuit of science and technology and nature, and the love of the divine in Hilchos Tshuva, in which a person loves emotionally. So Norman Lamb writes in a very nice insight, the average man is expected to observe all the actional commandments, the halacha. These actions plus the summary of otherwise profound philosophical ideas concerning God and the Torah, offers so briefly, are enough to give this average person the wherewithal to conduct his life in an orderly, moral, and civilized manner. The mitzvah will guide him on the right path. Such a person must aspire to understand the God and his attributes basically through, he's the average man, through the love of the divine. The pursuit of Avas Hashem therefore assumes different forms to different people. Norman Lamb, the Litvak, is splitting between the average man and the Talmid Chacham. Now, he bases himself really on a tradition. For instance, the Netziv in the Hamek Dover, the Netziv notes that the Rambam invokes the love of God, and that in another context he addresses martyrdom and the love of the divine that is emotional, and says that the Avas Hashem of that second one demands no intellectual activity. So the masses are not enjoined to love God through intellectual engagement. He doesn't say science, through the intellectual appreciation through Torah. For the commoners, Ahavat Hashem demands not love in the emotional sense, but an unswavering devotion and unshakable faith, even to the point of Mesiras Nefesh. That's how the Netziv tries to resolve the problem in the Rambam. Very nice. Now, having discussed the rational, let's move on to the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov comes with a radical new concept. The Baal Shem Tov says, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha. Can you see that? It's brought down in Reb Nachman, in the Sichos of the Ran of Reb Nachman, number 48. Mesaprim b'shem Baal Hashem HaKadosh, shepam achas nofel b'dato ma'od ma'od. Now that means that he lost his faith. He fell. And we're going to come back to this idea of falling. Remember, in John, in the New Testament, it says, greater love hath no man. Greater love hath no man than he who sacrifices himself for the Lord. And Achad Ha'am tried to state the difference between Jewish morality and the Gospels, not merely one of degree, but the very basis of morality. He tries to say that the Christian ethic of love is subjective and the Jewish ethic is objective, based on justice, moral value, and the study of law. The law gives us the limits of unconditional love. Now let's look at the Baal Shem Tov, which I consider heretically as a Pauline revolution. At one point in his life, they tell that he had a nefila. Reb Nachman talks about this multiple times. Adam nofel bedato, he falls into a state of apikoros and questioning, that left side of the chamber of the heart. Pamachas nofel bedato ma'od ma'od. He lost everything. He lost his faith. Ad shenidbe lo shebevadai lo yeh lo olam haba. Chas v'sholem. And it was such a level. You see how I love this? This gives me room to breathe. Who else would write in such a confessional way? I fell into this dark night of the soul, this dark self-doubt, to the point where I did not feel that there is an olam haba, or that I did not feel shelo yeh lo olam haba. Why wouldn't you have an olam haba? Oh, because you're questioning the divine. What we know in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, these are the following people who have lost their share in the world to come. And the Baal Shem says, they said about him that he had lost his world to come. He felt that he had lost his world to come. V'lo hoya lo b'ma lehachios etz atzmo klal. And how do you recover from that? That's not just an intellectual, it's an existential crisis. And how did he come round to it? How did he revive himself? V'omar, he said, Ani ohev et Hashem yisbarach below olam haba. Wow. I love God so much, even if I have no olam haba. That kind of love is a paradoxical love. It allows for the left side of the chamber that is maharher, that does question the divine. He is able to hold the left and the right side of that chamber in this schizophrumkeit, this schizophrenic schism, and even is able to say, I love God without olam haba. I think that's just an absolute dramatic way that Reb Nachman brings us to that completely paradoxical notion of the love of the God. Now let's go to the Hasidic master, the Moreh Naim, who will tell us the wire diagram. How do I come to this state? And how do I rescue myself from this state? He picks up where the Gemara left off. Your two Yetzes. And now he says, it's a command. You have to love the divine with both your Yetzes. All right, let's do it. Very nice. That's straight out of brachas, that you should bend the Yetzer Hara to the Yetzer Tov. And I didn't go into all the commentaries about the Shnei Yitzarim means that you have to subdue the left side of the heart. The whole of the Tanya for the Sefer Beinonim is how to subdue and to transform the Yetzer Hara that's in the left side of the heart. And the Gemara says there's a little fly on the leaflet between the right side and the left side of the heart. La Pesach Chatzos Rovetz, as God says to Cain after he killed Abel, beware. Now that we've opened the door to murder in the history of the world, just watch it. There is now in the heart of man this thanatos, this desire to murder. La Pesach, the opening, meaning the leaflet, between the auricle and the ventricles of the heart, there's a little fly that sits there, the zvuv. And the Gemara goes on into all of that. Comes along the Moreh Naim, the Reb Nachum Nochem of Chernobyl, and says, well, we know that. Your heart should be sholem with God. Don't be split in your divine service. There shouldn't be a machloikas within you. His heart should be saying one thing, his desire, and his head should be saying something. Ube emes. And now, being a Hasidic Rebbe, he knows he needs to take us in his hands as the Rebbe. He says that's the ideal. Now, be'emes, if a person really knew, this is Yediyah not in the Maimonidean sense, the knowledge of God through the science of nature and thing. This is an internal, experiential knowledge. Belev shalem, shemelo kol haaretz kavoda. If you really felt, and this is, remember, the Baal Shem Tov's revolution of Chassidut, based on Kabbalah. It's a pantheistic knowledge of God. Melo kol haaretz doesn't mean that his glory fills the world. He is in the Welt. Mamale kol almim. The Shechina is present in him. And if he really believed that the Shechina was listening to you in your davening, Vadai hoya mispale bislav is God. He'd be davening and dancing and jackknifing and like the Kedushas Levi. He would actually feel the presence of God. And he would be very intent on all his words. Since man does not have a perfect faith, a perfect knowledge of the divine, okay, so he doesn't, he shockles, he mumbles, he does his vush, and everyone according to the diminished seichel and knowledge that he has. The tikkun lozeh hamachloikus, he says, is letakin oso b'shorsho. How do I fix this machloikus in the heart? You have to go inside, deep. You got to go to the source of the split, the schizophrumkeit. Hainu ki ikar his havos machloikus hayetzahara. And now comes the radical statement, because everything that's happening to you down here is happening upstairs, in Kedusha. Wow. So if we go back to the second thesis that he says, why do we have this thing in our hearts? He says, how am I going to fix this in the source? If it's happening upstairs, it's happening downstairs. We were commanded to love him. Impossible. How can you love something in which you have absolutely no concept of who he is or what he is? He's beyond all knowledge. The Rambam tells us that in Mori Nevuchim. So the Mori Naim is taking us through the whole history, through the philosophy. Now he comes with this most brilliant, radical, earth-shattering concept. In fact, the only way to know him is the Yetzer Hara. I'm not going to know him through the Yetzer Tov. Yes, you're very good, you're great, yeah, and I'm filled with the love of the divine, and I'm davening and I'm shockling and I'm filled. That's an experiential love of the divine that very few have. Mori Naim knows that we don't have that. We come to shul and we shockle. Vush. So he comes out with this radical statement. Yo'atzalono haTorah b'Yetzer Hara. We have to go to the Yetzer Hara to understand the divine love. How? The entire universe is a moshel. What the Daigle calls a moshel had kadmoni. It is a primordial parable to what's going on upstairs. Everything down here is a hint to what's going on upstairs. And Reb Nachman says everything that happens to you down here is a remes from above. Meaning what? So the moshel, the parable, teaches us how to understand the nimshal, which is what? Upstairs. You want to know that if there is a problem down here in your faith, it's coming from the Yetzer Hara, you know that came from Kedusha, that came from upstairs. Okay, so how am I going to unravel it? I got to get into the Yetzer Hara down here. Dehainu, meaning, kol ha'tanugim she'olam kamo achilu, shtiyo, mishgol, like eating and drinking and sex, sheyovin mipnei ma ani ohevoto. I have to dig into my desire to understand what is that desire. Sheyovin mipnei ma ani ohevoso. What am I loving? What is the object of my tshuka? You want to get to Ahava of the Rambam? You have to go through Rabbeinu Bechaya. You have to understand what the chukka is. What is cheshek? What is obsession? What is your addiction to understand what Ahavat Hashem is? Halohu rak ava nefulo me'olam ha'ava. Because everything down here is a moshel to the nimshal which is upstairs. And what is upstairs? Oh, that's the olam of Ava. There's an archetypal love upstairs of food and drink and sexuality. It is an archetype that's coming down into this platonic world. It's an absolutely stunning vort. So then he ends up, and we will end up, by saying, Haborech Baruch Hu Makor Kol HaTanugim. You have to understand, you mustn't split between the right and the left up there. You have to go l'shoresh, the tikkun of down here is to go to a place up there, which is the source of all your Yetzer Haras in Kedusha, which is the source of all ta'anugim, of pleasure. You have to go to the pleasure principle upstairs to understand how it became fallen into this world of the Yetzer Hara. Ach yesh Yetzer Hara shemasame eine bal yira. And so the trick is, the avoida is not to get stuck in the moshel. The Yetzer Hara is loving to blind your eyes, shemasame einov, bal yira, so that you won't see the nimshal, and you'll just be stuck in the moshel. It's just stunning. I get stuck in the moshel is when I get stuck in my addiction, and I act on it instead of realizing that I have to understand where that is coming from upstairs. And now he resolves the whole problem with the Rambam. Asik Batorah. What? You want to understand how to understand that there is a nimshal? That it's not just the moshel? You gotta go to Asik HaTorah. Like the Gemara in Sukkah 52 says, if in Pogabam Novel, you have a naughty desire, and you want to act out on it? No, don't act out. Moshchein el Beis HaMedrash. Drag the Yetzer Hara into the Beis HaMedrash. Drag him into the Beis HaMedrash. Ki HaTorah tavlin liyetzer hara tshuva me'ahava. That will bring you to Yetzer Hara. And I just wanted to end with this concept that this impossible love of the divine, we've taken you through a tour through the Rambam, and the problem in the Rambam, who he himself is Soiser himself, and the Rabbeinu Bechaya shlogs him up, and then comes the latter day interpreters to try and make sense, and the only way they can do it is like the Netziv and the Litvak Lamb, by saying, well, you know, it is an intellectual understanding. Well, we split the people. The Hamonei Am, that's emotional, and for the Talmidei Chachamim, that's intellectual. No, not so fast, our dear intellectual Litvische brethren. You don't understand the depths of the heart of evil of man, his thanatos and his eros that Herr Rabbiner Freud introduced us to. That we are subject to these dark forces of evil that will tear continents apart, both on the macro level, the political level, that causes millions of people to die in its wake. How can you talk about the love of the divine? Comes along our Hasidic masters and inform us that you have to go to the dark night of the soul, within the heart of the dark Yetzer Hara, in the left side of the heart, the sinister, and you have to go down into that dark cave to understand where is that coming from, to experience that, so that you can understand that that is coming from Kedusha, that the Ahava Nefula is coming from Kedusha. Here he doesn't say it, but elsewhere he says it. that the Gevura, the dinim in this world that come down, also come from upstairs. That this isn't our world, we're flung into it, that it is a world that is set up in which we are merely the pawns to carry the divine and in this great experiment we call humanity. I think this is a way through for me, not just the springboard of the impossible love of the divine, especially after the Shoah and after what's going on right now in front of our eyes. But it is what the Baal Shem Tov says, that even if I am in the Nefila, in my apikoros and my absolute atheism, that there is any kind of intelligent design, what I called yesterday, the rabbi, I called it a holy atheism, and he didn't shut me up, that with that Nefila that we are in, and Reb Nachman saw that 200 years ahead of his time, that there will be an apikoros in this world. It's not something you can escape by saying, oh yes, I believe. You have to go through it. You have to see the atheism that makes more sense than the belief, where atheism makes more sense than belief. And the Baal Shem Tov tells us, as the great leader of this Pauline revolution, that the only response is, even if I've lost my Olam Haba, I've lost it all because of all the apikoros and all every single item lined in the Gemara in Sanhedrin 99, and I check that, yeah, I'm off that list. Check that, no, I'm off that list. I lost that. Oh man, you will know. You get to the pearly gates, they're going to say to you, you're going straight to hell. How did I revive myself? Because I feel the divine love. I feel the love. Which brings us back to the Simon Weil. That apikoros, that she became a Catholic in response to the suffering of the divine. The only metaphor she could make use of was John 3, greater love hath no man. That converted her to Catholicism, but we feel that we can bring her back. That her words, her deep words will resonate with us. That sometimes the love of God is bound up with the affliction. And the proof is that in the next piece of Gemara, B'chol Nafshecha, they talk about the crucifixion of Rabbi Akiva. Meeting and separation, both of them contain some good. And this good of friendship is unique, for when two beings who are not friends are near each other, there is no meeting. And when friends are far apart, there is no separation. As both forms contain the same good thing, they are both equally good. Similarly, Weil ends, in God's love there is an infinite nearness and an infinite distance. Lovers and friends are described as being chuka, desirous of becoming one, and also desirous that their union doesn't diminish, even if great distance were between them. Even though painful, that's what she calls affliction. For those who love, separation is good because it is love. And she illuminates what affliction is within the context of both agape and eros. May we be all zocher to the mitzvah of V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha, in this sense, b'shnei yitzrecha, with the two chambers, by delving and not running away from the Yetzer Hara, but understanding it. And for me, this is the true transformation, the paradoxical transformation of the Yetzer Hara, to get back to this paradoxical love of the divine. Have a wonderful week.